So, the topic for this episode is something that's been on my mind for the past while: how to be simultaneously a spiritualist and an activist. If you know anything about manifestation, you'll know that in New Age spirituality, we're often told to practice detachment. Live in the end, perceive only what aligns with your desired reality. Whatever you don't desire just doesn't exist. Now, in activism, we're told to practice the opposite: perceive the current reality, even when it's painful or uncomfortable, especially with all of its problems, and understand our responsibility to act and make change with the power we have. Detached versus incredibly involved. How do we reconcile these two perspectives? I've seen so many people in my spiritual communities choose to simply step back, put themselves in a little bubble, and not see issues like the genocide Israel is committing on Palestine, or anything else that they don't see impacting their self firsthand. Anything that isn't immediately apparent in the room they are in. They simply choose to not put themselves in situations that could be met with disagreeability. While I don't believe there is anything wrong with choosing your personal peace and escaping the emotional guilt trip cycle most media outlets are trying to force feed us, I believe most spiritualists do this only because they haven't seen examples of loud political activism that don't feel like self-harm. It is not because my spiritual girlies don't care about the world or are too privileged to see outside of themselves, which is an accusation that gets hurled a lot at non-activists. The spiritualists I'm talking about include the vast majority of my own clients and students. These are some of the most caring and emotionally intelligent people I have ever met. But mainstream spirituality tends to prioritize the individual and, oftentimes, external passivity. If you'd like to explore alternatives to this, I'd recommend you look into indigenous spirituality, because a lot of it tends to prioritize the collective, which really is what we all are in the concept of oneness. One book I really love is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, especially the part where she talks about the Wendigo in our ideology. So, in trending spirituality, we say all of the work is internal, and if we can create peace within us, there will be peace in this world. There are very few blueprints for spiritual activists that does not involve suffering, sacrifice, lots of anger, that does not, as we put it, disrupt our own personal peace. I haven't yet seen any of these blueprints circulating in my spiritual communities. Therefore, with this narrative, spiritualists get funneled into passivity in the 3D when it comes to politics. Why is it that mainstream spirituality emphasizes this kind of external passivity, that we're presented with this false extreme binary of either care about the world or protect your own peace? It can't be both. And why do we tend to be guided into solitude, away from staying in the scene and being disagreeable in the scene, of reinforcing our own identity at the expense of others' discomfort? We're told, if someone disrupts your personal peace, just walk away. Some people with boundary issues can benefit from this practice for a time, but we need to wonder why the trendiest spiritual narratives tend to look like capitulation. They're always the ones where we don't go directly into conflict with bigots or right-wing people. Instead, we retreat. We avoid confrontation. But spirituality is meant to reveal us, not mask the parts we're not comfortable with. Through confrontation regarding our principles, and those conflicts reflected externally, we can discover ourselves. Confrontation does not mean we need to react with anger. It does not mean we lose control of ourselves. When we want to reinforce our identity and principles in the 3D, we're told to go and rebalance our internal. Why struggle? Surrender. But who is telling us to automatically assume that activism is struggle? Also, we exist in physical reality for the 3D to be a medium for self-exploration. It is not meant to be neglected in favor of retreat to the internal. It is the reflection and realization. The 3D is a tool on our journey with the internal. So shouldn't our internal and external actions match up? The 3D can reaffirm our internal change. Confrontation can reinforce your identity. Confrontation can provide you with a gift of evidence of who you are. The external is not meaningless. We exist in the physical realm for a reason. We came here to experience that. Therefore, the changes happening in your internal are not threatened by anything external you don't want to see. They are meant to be mirrored in your external, often through your own 3D action. For example, a creative project like writing a book. This is very widely accepted as the spiritual internal being translated into the external. We take 3D actions like typing up the book, writing things down, publishing the book. Why not politics then? Why not 3D action for systemic change? It all goes back to the shame machine, and I've talked about this before, how shame is used as a control tactic, and how we should be very wary of any behavior where our main motivator is shame. No matter what that behavior looks like on the outside, whether it appears good and moral or not. Same goes for any type of content that attempts to elicit shame. We really need to wonder at their motivations. There are so many people in this world who care so much, and it's such a shame, pun intended, to watch them enter the activism scene to try and create change and then become funneled down this guilt pipeline of you should feel bad if you or others don't do this, you're a bad person, we're all complicit. I don't know many activist friends who don't feel bad, or at least feel obligated to feel bad on a daily basis, especially for enjoying life. You and I, we are not criminals. Most of us are trying our best. Yet popular media so often pushes the concept of suffering as the way to relate, vicarious suffering even, as an obligation or some way to alleviate, to ease the guilt that has been pushed upon our self-perception, which is ridiculous. My feeling bad does not improve the lives of those oppressed or undergoing genocide. My action is what will make the difference. And I see these beautiful, caring, wonderfully loud women with bags under their eyes just hold the idea of, yeah, I'm just not going to be doing or feeling too well right now, when the rest of the world is like that. It's just a messed up time. Do you know why the media pushes the guilt narrative? Even though we are seeing activists post about the genocide, and even though sometimes it seems like we can actually talk about these things on social media, that we actually do have free speech in a way, the algorithm filters the narrative of this topic we are getting. Such an immense genocide with so many witnesses would be incredibly difficult to hide in this day and age. So what does the media do? It lets us see it, but at the same time, it weakens us. It poisons us with shame. Shame is its greatest tool, especially now With every single piece of content we watch, we need to ask ourselves, does this empower or weaken me? It is not enough to simply be consuming information anymore or taking responsibility by remaining informed. We need to notice the manner in which the content is presented us and how it makes us feel. And of course, a lot of creators don't intend to weaken us. Anyone undergoing a genocide or any activist feeling desperate themselves is going to convey their own emotional state. Of course they are. And a lot of activists are regenerating different versions of the content they were fed by the shame machine, because that is the format they were given. The shame format is what gets attention on these apps. But the display that goes viral does so for a reason, and it's not a good one for us in most cases. This method of activism is not sustainable for the average human. So many people who want to be an activist or want to be politically active burn out because of guilt culture. The aim as an activist is not to martyr yourself, to throw your own body and blood and sweat onto the scale of justice. It is not to rage it all better. The aim as an activist is not to martyr yourself. It's not to throw your own sacrifice onto the scale of justice. It's not to rage it all better. We need sustainability. So the shame machine exists for two reasons. One, to alienate those who cannot stand the pressure of so much shame. Two, to weaken those who still do not choose to look away. Shame makes us weaker. You cannot deny those are its long-term effects. When we are chronically in a state of shame, we feel more hopeless. Sure, a lot of creators use shame as an initial hook to pull someone into a cause, but shame is not sustainable. There are these popular narratives like humans are evil, humans are destroying the planet, which are just accepted with a shrug most of the time, but which humans? The imperialists who control the media, they know there will always be people who care. As humans, there is no way to completely stop us from caring. So what do? They feed us narratives and ideas that make the act of caring very grueling. These people who care get redirected, convinced that shame and guilt are prerequisites to any sort of social activism. Acknowledging privilege seems to be automatically associated with feeling guilt, even more so than it is with taking tangible action sometimes. Even when a person did not actively choose to harm a group of oppressed people, and even though in most situations it is not us, the general public, who is doing the damage, but a few people, ones who heavily influence our politics and our media, which is another reason for a spiritualist to be political, to help create our new world and our desired reality through organization and choosing to use our power externally in the 3D. The purpose of the shame machine is to appeal to the empathy of people who care, then twist logic to make these people as small as possible, as weak as possible, because that's what shame does. It reduces us. So the humans who care about the world, because let's face it, we are those mega corporations' biggest enemies and biggest threat, are made as small as possible through the subtle poisoning of shame, through the guilt media pipeline. A lot of people are very surprised that I'm so openly political because I am also a spiritual teacher. And often the first question is, how do you remain centered while doing that? Centered meaning at peace and not a ball of guilt and rage. How do you not feel bad? Again, there's that false binary, the immediate expectation that spirituality and peace would conflict with activism. There's this quote from Tamara, the author of the blog Muse Guided, which I will also link in this episode. She says, "Rage is a tool, not a home. Guilt is never helpful, and rage can be a tool." I recently co-hosted a fundraiser for Palestine with some friends, and we ended up raising the equivalent of nearly 3,000 USD to donate to families in Gaza and Palestine action. During the event and while setting up for it, I did not feel bad. Did I put in effort and was I tired after? Yes. But what I felt wasn't shame. It was love for my community. So many people I love showed up to support our cause, and a lot of people told me they felt a lot of hope in that event, like they were making a difference. The same action can be from a basis of love and hope and community, or from guilt and desperation. But only one of those is sustainable. And a lot of the time it is a mixture of both. Yet remember who shame serves, and remember who love serves. Love serves all of us. Shame tends to come from a root of love and caring, yet shame is a poison, a twisted logic. Shame serves the oppressor, weaponizes our empathy against us. How does one affect change without first feeling terrible all the time? So many people preach love, practice guilt. On the other hand, we have many New Age spiritualists preaching love, practicing passivity. I recently came across a video by this creator named Alyssa. Her Instagram handle is at Don't Call Me Liz. I'll add the link in the description. But she basically talks about the framework of 10 different rules to enact social change based on the Social Visionary Ecosystem Map by Deepa Ayet. And I'm going to quote / partially paraphrase her on several of those rules here. She says, "A visionary is someone who imagines bold new possibilities for the future, like Moran Zamdani, who believes that NYC should have free buses and universal childcare. A builder is someone who creates structures that can support change, like a person starting a mutual aid network, which is where people can share their resources like food or equipment, knowledge, and skills." She also says healer, like healing circle facilitator or therapist for marginalized groups or activists, and caregiver, very important members who are sometimes more behind the scenes but cook meals or watch kids for people organizing, and weaver, who connects those with shared goals and values so that communities can be created. Of course, boycotting as well is a very effective change. Boycotting does not require you to feel guilty. It simply requires you to not give your money to a certain company. There are many alternatives to whatever you need that do exist in the world today, especially if you're here listening to this podcast. I'm going to put the list of companies to boycott down below so we can consciously not support genocide. Again, these things do take effort, but over time they tend to become habit. So it's kind of about stepping into a different framework of habit. No shame is required. So right now, in this moment, I'm feeling well, I'm feeling good, and I don't feel any shame about it. In fact, I don't feel shame at all. Shame is not an emotion that serves me, except to look into its origins when it comes up and see what narratives have been drilled into me and whose purpose those narratives are serving, because they're definitely not mine. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really hope it provided you some helpful perspectives, and if you have any more resources on emotionally sustainable activism, I'd really love if you commented them. I recently published this Substack article on my blog, which is called The New World Blueprint by Zoe Morana. It's called The Karmic versus the Creative, and I would highly, highly recommend that if you're just looking to shift your perspective on what evolution means, especially spiritually. And if you're tired of feeling like you're always climbing the spiritual karmic ladder, if you're tired of feeling like you keep going through lesson after lesson and you're just tired of that system, if you're tired of the karmic curriculum, I would highly recommend that article. I will also link it down below. Thank you so much. I love you. See you next video.